Well, this week, columnists in the tabloids and broadsheets alike were fulminating against the University of Hull. Why? Well, a religious activism course had supposedly been told that they would lose marks if they didn't write in gender-neutral language. For example, they shouldn't write about what he or she might do, but rather what they would do, even if there's only one person being referred to. So I'm not a he, but I'm a they or an it. And nouns should be gender-free too, so no fireman, chairman, policewoman or stunt woman. Their gender is irrelevant. Would gender-neutral language be better for mankind? The stimulating, provocative questions are us. So Emma, hi. You're neither male nor female, right?
That's true. I identify as non-binary, which means that I'm neither male nor female, and corresponding to that, I use the they, them pronoun.
And you say gender roles are damaging our society, so we need to think very carefully about language, yeah?
Yes. So a lot of our social selves are codified and encultured in the language that we use. We really use it to construct our entire society. And what's certainly true is that there is a huge variance of gender presentation and gender identity within humankind. There isn't simply
humankind,
men and women. Exactly, humankind in place of mankind.
You wouldn't say mankind, that should be,
I wouldn't, just because humankind is a more accurate descriptor, in the same way that me using they, them is a more accurate descriptor of my identity than using he or she.
Would you use homo sapiens?
I very rarely in my life use scientific language to describe the people I work with.
Wise man, it means. Okay. But it's something, do we need to think about that?
I think we certainly should be thinking about the evolution of language to support gender neutrality.
Yeah, got you.
And that's for a number of reasons. The first of which is that it stops this assumption that either the most important people in the room are men or that the only people in the room are men. And secondly, it does include that wider spectrum of gender. There's an excellent quote by German linguist Louisa Pusch, who says that gender and language should be both comfortable and fair. And she was referring to German, which is one of the most strictly gender-codified languages in Europe.
German.
And English is not...
What's happening in German?
So German has a grammatical gender and a gendered pronominal system. So they use gendered pronouns and they have gendered nouns, and that's supported by the wider grammar of the language. But actually the German state is encouraging lecturers, professionals and industry to use gender-neutral language.
God, I might have got an A if that had been back.
Students. Well, so in universities, a bit like the University of Hull, universities in Germany, their lecturers are using gender-neutral language to refer to students because it's inclusive of everyone and gives that space for trans people who are neither male nor female.
Yeah. It's a matter, Andrew, it's a matter of courtesy, this, and sensitivity, isn't it?
Courtesy is all very well. I mean, you're describing encouraging people to use certain words. My problem is when words are policed. When language becomes police, that is my problem. I mean, look, we can all get back to. If we think about the first series of Star Trek, it used to open with "To boldly go where no man had gone before," and then Next Generation it became "To boldly go where no one has gone before." No one cared. I mean, I'm bothered by "To boldly go" because it's a split infinitive. It really annoys me. But no one cares about the gender neutralisation there. No one cares about that sort of stuff. What they do, no, they don't. What they really care about.
Who cares? Who cares? Put your hand up if you care.
Well, they're mad. I think.
Well, they're mad.
Well, that's a bit politically incorrect as well, isn't it? Hold on.
No, I think people do care. No, but let me make my point. I don't think it is about those sorts of things, humankind or mankind. I mean, those are sort of interchangeable now. They're synonymous anyway. We're talking about when people actively, and it is a minority of activists, it really is a minority, seek to have people disciplined or sacked because they refuse to use language that they are imposing. That's not the evolution of language, that's the imposition of language, and I think that's problematic.
I think it really depends on the context. So you may, for example, be a person that wants to use gender-neutral language to self-describe, and you may tell your employer that, you may tell your friend or your colleague that, and they continue to use the wrong language. And that's a mark of disrespect towards the person, a lack of willingness to engage, and
Can I ask you, Emma?
So you should be disciplined in a professional context if you refuse to do right by people you're working with.
Right, so if I said to Belinda, you hear what they said, would that be the correct thing about what you've just said?
Yes, so the singular they has existed in English for a very long time and works perfectly grammatically.
But I wouldn't say, you hear what it said. That's rude, isn't it?
Yeah, I would say that it is dehumanising. It shouldn't ever be a voice for the entirety of the trans community. Some people may self-select to use it, but it in general is quite a dehumanising approach.
Isn't this actually bad for women? The suffragettes would be appalled about this, wouldn't they?
Well,
they want women to be noticed. They want women to be out there. They want women to achieve and for other women to know know, that they have achieved.
It's really about self-determination, though, isn't it? I mean, people should be able to decide how they're going to identify. And just
But I don't know how you're going to identify.
But then I'll tell you. So just as I tell you my name, and then you call me by the name that I've told you,
right.
I would tell you my gender pronoun, and you call me that. It's actually pretty simple, and it doesn't need to be such a complicated thing. And I think it's very important for us to respect the way that people choose to identify.
But it's not simple, because a lot of the new pronouns that are being invented, gender-neutral pronouns like she and them, these have just been invented and imposed on people.
But all language is invented.
Sure. And that's why, okay, the distinction I'm trying to make is when language evolves, when a language is absorbed into the culture, then that's an acceptable thing. But when you push it on people, that's the distinction I'm trying to make.
But I don't think there is any distinction there. The point is that over time language changes. And, you know, there are terms which were used a couple of hundred years ago to describe people who were of dual heritage or mixed race. They would have been described as mulatto. These days you go around saying that, people go, what on earth are you talking about? Well, and people don't even understand the term, quite rightly, because it was an obnoxious term and we got rid of it. And as time goes on, we have the freedom to choose.
People argue this is political incorrectness, but it's actually grammatical incorrectness.
But no, but actually, there are places where this is incredibly important. Like, for example, you mentioned the term chairman, and lots of companies and organisations still refer to a chairman. There's no need to do that. That sends a message out to young women saying, exactly, it sends a message out to young women saying, you know, you're not qualified to apply for this job. It might be a very subtle message. It might be not what the person saying it intends. But actually, can we do better? Yes. Should we? Yes. Brilliant.
Belinda. What about people who are non-binary? What about people who are gender fluid?
We're all male and female. We've always... Yes, of course, we're all male and female. There are
what about transgender people?
There are a tiny minority of people who have intersex conditions, and there are a tiny minority of people who have some condition where they may have a female brain and a male body. Apart from this, we are all male and female, and the attempt to suggest that there is a third gender is, as far as I'm concerned, it's an ideological and a political project. It doesn't exist. The words male and female have existed throughout history, throughout the world. They refer, men are people who have penises, women are people who have vaginas. It's as simple as that. I would absolutely refuse to refer to this woman here, who's clearly a woman, as a they, because for me that would be imposing an ideological political system. Because she is. If everybody watching this programme can see that she is a woman. And that is imposing.
That's your problem. I think that's actually your
imposing.
problem. You're imposing.
No, you are asking me to engage in an ideological, political system which I disagree with. I believe we are all male and female.
What they should be called is imposing an ideological system.
No,
I really want to come back and address just some of the scientific inaccuracies of the statement. It just is not true to say that on a biological level we are only male or female. Being intersex, which is a combination of 32 different ways your chromosomes can combine, is as common as being red-haired. But that's biological. Gender is socially constructed and performed and is separate to your body. It may align. You may have a female assigned or perceived body and be female, but you may not. I do not present in a masculine or androgynous way because I question the idea that to be non-binary, I have to masculinize my appearance. By you saying that you refuse to use my pronouns or refer to me as the gender that I am is one of the grossest acts of disrespect that I'm forced to endure on a daily basis. You clearly have no empathy or no respect for people like me or the wider trans community, and that immediately diminishes my respect for you as an individual.
Your respect for me is already diminished if you insist that I ascribe to some ideology of third gender, which I do not agree with. If this he and she is socially constructed, how come everybody watching this, everybody in the audience, can basically identify male and female just by looking? Occasionally there are people who are more difficult to identify, and we try to be tactful, but it's not just socially ascribed. It relates to a physical reality reflected in our voices, our appearances, in all kinds of ways.
Isn't life a great spectrum? No? Don't you think? Someone must agree with me. Who wants to say something? You want to say something in a grey jumper. They want to say something. Are you they, or do I say she wants to say something?
I am a female. That's my belief
Do
system.
you want me to say she wants to say something?
And that is fine. However, the idea that you're saying that if this person chooses to say that they are they, that you can't engage with that because of your belief system. We live in a culture where lots of people have lots of different beliefs, as is very, very clear on today's show. We cannot say, I have this belief system, so therefore I'm going to impose it on everyone. You can't do that. Like, she has a particular... They have a particular...
There we go.
Look, at least I accept that. They have a particular belief system. You can't impose yours on them.
I'm not talking about a belief system.
In a minute. Over there, yes, in the yellow.
I was
going to say lady in the yellow, or man. I don't know, because I don't know what to say.
Exactly. I think that
person?
What do you want me to say?
Person.
And that's perfectly... It's courtesy, isn't it? What do you want? What would you like me to say?
I really don't mind. You can call me anything I want. The point is, I think we're complicating things too much. I think someone once said that politicians treat symptoms and leaders treat disease. And I think if the problem we're concerned with now is gender inequality, then okay, let's try and focus on equal rights for women in the workplace, not stigmatizing people who are transgender. But I think that we're placing too much weight on something that's kind of petty, in my opinion. I think that we need to focus on more important things.
Kate, is this worth... I was going to say manning the barricades for. Is this worth personing the barricades for? Seriously. I mean, yeah. Look, here's the thing. Let me ask you this. You've had on YouTube a magnificent moment on the programme, whether you were agreed with or not. On this programme, you've had marriage proposals from it. You've had millions of hits, 4 million hits around the world.
Join the queue.
When you ridiculed religion on this show.
I didn't ridicule religion. I made a point about the fallacy of believing in things without evidence.
But you're not so... You're sensitive about that, but you're sensitive about gender, but not so sensitive about religion. So you don't want to... You've got to bend over backwards not to offend anyone about gender.
Oh, no. Actually, I completely disagree with you there. It's not... I'm very firm about gender, and I'm a massive campaigner against gender discrimination and, all this kind of stuff. And I think one of the powerful things about gender-neutral language is that I can send in my CV and I can just put my initial at the top, and I haven't got to write Ms. or Miss or Mrs. or Mr. on it, and I'm going to be not judged first on my gender, but I'm going to be yeah, exactly, and I'm all for that. But there's two things here. Firstly, there is what actually should be a very small issue, which is, do we address people in the way they would like to be addressed? Now, you suggest that I'm massively disrespectful to religion, and let me be clear, I do not respect religion in that sense.
No, it is suggested. I don't suggest it.
But if somebody says to me, hello, I'm Reverend Jones, I call that person Reverend. Now, do I believe that that makes them genuinely anointed by God? It doesn't matter what I believe about that. That's what they want to be called, Reverend. And so I call them Reverend. And if somebody says to me, I want to be called they, or I want to be called Ms, or I don't, I just want to be called Nikki, then I call them by what they want to be called, regardless of why that is.
Sarah. How well put. It's a matter of courtesy.
Yes. Courtesy is extremely important, and if people are in a dialogue with gender constructs, we have to respect where they're coming from. But we have to keep being allowed to ask other questions, such as, is there a relevance between personhood and biology? Am I going to start feeling that womanhood has been abolished in the way that I understand it, if I'm no longer allowed to refer to myself as she? Because, in fact, there's a kind of...
about you not being allowed to
hang on, Emma, she can refer to herself as she, right?
Yeah, the whole point of language to self-describe is that it should be fluid, it should be fair. This isn't everyone is now gender neutral, we have robbed feminine or masculine identity, because I'm allowed to identify a way. It doesn't take anything from you. And if it does, that poses meaningful questions about the flimsy way gender is constructed.
The French Revolution.
Maybe it isn't as firm or as biologically innate as we assume, and that it isn't at all.
Let me throw it. It's not like the French Revolution where they changed language or Pol Pot. This is actually a matter of choice, a matter of preference, isn't it?
But there's something further behind in that, because when we all know that if you want to abuse people, you must first abuse the language, and the question is it an abuse of language, or is it a revelation of the complexity of the human person, or is it a closing down of an understanding of something that's profoundly important? Is there an importance to male and female, or not. And if we can't have that conversation still in a respectful way, we might be including the abolition of male and female as we understand them, which might have spiritual significance. Is the project, as someone referred to create neutrality, dangerous in some way? Now, if we can't ask that question without being shouted down, that's alarming. Are we dealing with the abolition of man and woman in a profound way? And I think maybe we are. I think what Kate says is very true. There's lots of useful things about not having to present as male and female in a job application, but something else very important is at stake in this debate.
This isn't, I mean, you know, this idea that there is an imposition of it, some people might say, well, when councils are doing it, or when universities are doing it, it is something of an imposition. And some people might be afraid to embark upon a sentence and then walk through eggshells until they get to the end of the sentence in case they say the wrong thing. And so it's not exactly liberating, it's constricting, isn't it?
Well, it's liberating for people that are vulnerable. And the point that I would make is that people are very understandably afraid of saying the wrong thing, using the wrong terminology, and that is okay. This isn't asking people to immediately be incredibly well-versed in the vocabulary and the experiences of trans people. It's asking you to embrace a new piece of learning and knowledge, accept that communities, both of trans men and women and trans non-binary people, have existed forever and have existed propped up by particular language constructs in other parts of the world. Accept that, ask questions. We're happy and willing to answer them. Do your own research. It's okay to make mistakes. The bad thing is to make a mistake and refuse to accept that you've made it and refuse to learn. Everyone will stumble, and that's fine.
Peter, now you work for the Daily Telegraph. I want your mission next week to go to Telegraph and to convince the editor to use gender-neutral language from now on.
Nicky,
How will that go down?
The truth is, the Telegraph pretty much does use gender-neutral language. It doesn't use they, but it uses firefighter and it uses chair. Truth is, language is organic. It reflects the society that it comes out of, and you can impose bits of it, but ultimately, is they going to stick as a personal pronoun for one person? I kind of doubt it, because actually that's not how most people see the world. And I think, we're kind of right on the margin here. I'm father of 2 daughters. I think, actually, firefighter is better than fireman.
Yeah.
My 2 girls, if they want to work in the fire service, terrific.
Because it's accurate.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we should get too hung up. If you want to tie yourself in knots, ultimately, the arbiter of whether that works or not will be the way people use language, and they will accept it or reject it on a basis of common sense, because there's nothing more utilitarian than language.
And quite happily, the singular they, them has been in the English language for quite a long time. So, for example, you find a lost object, you say, oh, someone's left their bag on the train station. Maybe we should try and return it to them.
That's
you wouldn't say, because it's clunky, someone has left his or her bag on the train station. That takes more time to say, it's clunky, it's a Frankenstein sentence, and the singular they, them has been in English language use.
I love that phrase, Frankenstein. Emma, I love that phrase, Frankenstein sentence. That's a great phrase. Belinda.
We mustn't lose sight of the fact that language does refer to a reality. As a writer, I'm very aware of this. It's very important. He, she refers to a male and female reality. And I think that there is something very serious at stake if we really do start eroding concepts of male and female, which I believe is happening, and it is.
People are very worried about that for a reason.
Is that happening? Concepts of male and female?
If we get to a point where the women's rights movement can't talk about the experiences of women, that's a problem. But I don't see that as being under threat personally. I think actually there's much more time with that. There's much more of an issue out there right now with people's expectations about men and about women. And actually, I think it's better for men and it's better for women and it's better for everybody who doesn't feel like they fit into those categories. If we say, you know what, let's not have a way that men behave and a way that women behave. Let's talk about how people are and what people want to do. And wherever you are comfortable within that, great. And great news in that respect for people who would otherwise have been excluded from certain jobs and so on. This has got to be the way forward.
We have to, listen, we have to leave it there on that one, because we're going to talk about Easter next. You can join in all this morning's debates by logging on to bbc.co.uk, the big questions, and follow the link to the online discussion, #BBCTBQ.